Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Core studio. Welcome to the show. Well, it is finally here. Spoiler season has begun. I mean, last week and early this week, I know we got the Charms as spoilers and some Commanders as well, but now it is officially here. We have launched. It is spoiler season time. And of course, with Streets of New Capenna, there were some, okay, they weren't even rumors at this point. I believe it was confirmed and there was art for it that we've seen. Urabrask is here. That's right, yet another Phyrexian Praetor is back at it. And speaking of being back at it, Eddie is back at it as well, helping me out with these spoilers. So of course, if I make any mistakes in the comments below, I mean absolutely anything, make sure you blame Eddie because it's always his fault and never mine. And now with that said, let's jump into it. So, Urabrask Heretic Praetor is a 4/4 Phyrexian Praetor with haste that costs 3 red. It has, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, the next time they would draw a card this turn, instead, they exile the top card of their library. They may play it this turn. So let's break things down here a bit. Okay, again, a 4/4 with haste for 5 mana. Yeah, okay, not all that great. I mean, okay, in Commander terms, that's not, anything to be excited or scared about if you're the opponent. However, one thing to be excited about with this Commander is that, again, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You can play this turn. That is Impulse Draw. Every single turn in a mono-red Commander deck now, with this as your Commander, you are getting Impulse Draw. That is fantastic card advantage. Or maybe I should say, again, temporary card advantage. But again, in mono-red, that's what you get, and it works great in a lot of scenarios. And of course, on the other side of this, of course, with all the Praetors, essentially, there's one major benefit for you and one major downside for your opponents. The downside's actually pretty significant. Because at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, the next time they draw a card this turn, so again, essentially when they do their, draw step and their actual just regular draw for their turn, instead, they are going to exile that top card of their library and they can play it this turn. So instead of them just getting their regular draw in a turn, we are replacing their actual draw with Impulse Draw. In other words, instead of their actual draw that they usually would get for the turn being permanent that they can just add to their hand, it is now temporary card advantage. So whereas our Impulse Draw is in addition to our regular draw, we are replacing their actual draw with Impulse Draw instead. So it's kind of a use it or lose it type of approach. If your opponents don't use that card that they get access to temporarily, it's gone. Whereas we are getting that as an additional value, so yeah, if we don't happen to use that Impulse Draw, that's okay, we still got our regular draw, whereas our opponents did not. So in our case, it's going to be very easy for us to build up our hand because, say we have an Impulse Draw of a card that we really like, cool, let's cast that, and yeah, keep some other cards in our hand, whereas our opponents are going to be in more of a panic mode. Instead of getting their actual draw, they're just going to say, okay, I get to play this card, but I have to play it this turn, and maybe that's a card that they don't want to play this turn. What if it's a counter spell? What if it's some card that they can't utilize on their turn, or they don't have the mana that turn for it? Instead of actually keeping that card advantage and being able to hold onto it, that card is just gone forever. They can no longer get that card because it is just in exile. Okay, there are very few ways to actually get exile cards back, like, Rift Sower or something like that, but come on. No one really plays those cards for the most part. Regardless, it's gone. So not only does this Commander help us build up our own hand, but it also can tear down our opponent's hands over time by turning their regular draws that they would usually just be able to keep into temporary draws that are going to go away. Now, keep in mind, of course, this just affects the first card essentially they're going to draw in the turn, again, after the upkeep. basically another draw step draw. It doesn't say it in that way, but that's basically what it means. So if they have any spells that actually help them draw cards, obviously those are not going to become impulse draws or anything like that, but still. It can be a great commander that essentially can help you ensure that you're going to have a ton of card advantage throughout the game and be able to build up your own hand, whereas your opponents are going to have pretty tiny hands that, they can't really keep around all that much. So definitely an interesting take on a Praetor, and again, with Praetors, we typically see, big advantage for you, big downside for your opponents, and yeah, this one can be especially brutal against certain decks. Ironically, with Urabrask's name being what it is, it sounds kind of like Urabrask, which is kind of like what the new Urabrask does, if you're following me. Urabrask is a decently old card from the original Kamigawa, so I'll read its Oracle text. It says, if a player would draw a card, that player exiles that card face up instead. Each player may play lands and cast spells from among cards they exile with Urabrask this turn. Now, obviously, this applies to essentially all cards that are going to be drawn, but still, there are some comparable notes to this, obviously. And, if you look on the EDH rec page, you might see some interesting interactions that work with Urabrask that might work well also with this new Praetor too. So make sure you keep that in mind when you see, a new commander that is somewhat similar to an old card. And again, ironically, the name is kind of similar as well, which is just, fun. Regardless, speaking of fun, I think the direction that many players might take this commander is in the group slug direction, talking about cards like Spell Shock, Zozu the Punisher, and Mana Barbs. So in group slug strategies, you generally just kind of want a bunch of negative effects that, well, mostly might impact your opponents, but might impact you as well. Essentially, you're just slugging it all out and then taking everyone down, maybe including yourself, and hoping that you just end up on top at the end. For example, Spell Shock is an enchantment that says whenever any player casts a spell, Spell Shock is going to deal 2 damage to them. So this can be an incredibly punishing effect, especially against certain decks, and now again, kind of with that combination with your commander, your opponents have to think twice before they're actually casting things. They're going to get punished even further now for actually casting their spells, so not only do they only have temporary access to that top card of their library, but if they choose to actually cast it, because they don't want to, just lose it, they're going to take some damage for doing so. Now, keep in mind, Urabrask does say you may play that card this turn, so that means that you can actually play lands from those exiled cards, and so can your opponents as well. So, let's punish our opponents even further with that, with Zozu the Punisher, which says whenever a land enters battlefield, Zozu the Punisher deals 2 damage to that land's controller. So now, even if that player has a land that's exiled at the top with that new impulse draw instead of their regular draw, they have to decide, okay, is it worth taking 2 damage from this to actually get that land into play? And then, of course, we can just confuse things even further and make things even tougher for our opponents to make decisions when we have something like Mana Barbs in play. Mana Barbs is an extremely brutal card that says whenever a player taps a land for mana, Mana Barbs deals 1 damage to that player. So this just further makes our opponents have to think through their decisions. I mean, okay, oh no, okay, I impulse draw this card instead of actually drawing it, so I don't have access to it later. Oh gosh, okay, I really like this card, but it's got a high converted mana cost. It might also not be the right time to actually cast it, and if I tap my lands to actually cast it, I'm gonna get pinged for a lot. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Fun times for your friends in a game of Commander with your group slug deck. But yeah, there are a ton of punishing cards out there, and these are 3 fantastic ones to highlight. There are a lot of options in red especially. I mean, of course, I just want to bring up another one real quick. Sulfuric Vortex is a great card for a group slug deck. It says, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, Sulfuric Vortex deals 2 damage to that player. If a player would gain life, that player gains no life instead. So this just kind of increases the urgency of the entire situation. Again, everyone's life totals are going down, including your own. Everyone's getting pinged for 2 on their upkeep. And then, you know what? Even for those players that might have some life gain effects in their deck, you can't gain life. There's no getting out of this. I mean, okay, yes, you can get rid of the enchantment, but as long as this enchantment's in play, there's no getting out of this. Everyone's life total is going down, and the pressure is on. And of course, yes, this might be dealing damage to you, but even in mono red, of course, there are plenty of ways to make it so it's not as even of a play as your opponents might want it to be. Because you can tilt the scales with those group slug effects, you can make those punishing effects even more punishing for your opponents with something like Torbrand or Fire Emancipation. Torbrand says if a red source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. This is an incredibly brutal effect. Again, hey, okay, Spell Shock's in play. You know that card that you would normally just get in your hand and draw? Okay, you're going to impulse that draw instead because, my commander's in play. By the way, if you do choose to cast that spell, well, you're going to take, well, not just 2 from Spell Shock, but an extra 2 from Torbrand, you know, so that's going to be 4 damage for just casting that spell that you normally would just be able to get in your hand and play whenever you want and not take damage for. Oh, and by the way, maybe I also have Mana Barbs in play, so every land that you tap is going to ping you for a ton as well. And speaking of a ton of damage, and actually, let's just say a ton of money as well, because Fire Emancipation's like 20 bucks or something at this point, but I feel like I need to mention it for a group select strategy, of course, because it says, if a source you control will deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage to that permanent or player instead. So, yeah, that's a spicy card that needs to be reprinted, Wizards. Please do so, thank you. But yeah, tripling up on your damaging effects can obviously put the pressure on your opponents and make their decisions nearly impossible to make. You know, you're just kind of throwing one wrench and then another into their plans, and basically, yeah, that's kind of what a group slug commander deck is trying to do. Now, of course, I will mention I'm trying to get better about this with these kinds of quick take episodes because players have been asking for it. But for the cards that I am mentioning in these episodes, I am going to be including them in a link in the description below, so you've got easy access to them. Because, yeah, when new commanders are spoiled, there are definitely times where certain cards might start getting increased demand for, because, again, they work well, they commander. So, yes, just to help you out really quick, there's a link in the description below. Really quick, though, some cards that, well, thankfully aren't on that list, and thankfully can't go in an Urabrask deck because they would be obnoxious. Cards like Drannith Magistrate and Curse of Exhaustion do not match up, and obviously they don't go in a red deck. That being said, if you happen to have a deck that utilizes both the new Urabrask and one of these, it can be a very, very, very brutal combo. Drannith Magistrate says your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands, so yeah, now essentially, hey, you know those cards that you're impulse drawing? Well, you can't actually cast them because you're casting them from exile, which is not your hand, so there goes all of your draws, or all of your, you know, draw step draws. And then Curse of Exhaustion says enchant player can't cast more than one spell each turn. So yes, this is basically, hey, okay, you get to impulse draw this card, and now you got to make a really tough decision. Are you going to cast just that, or are you going to cast something for your hand, because you can't do both? But yeah, it's probably a good thing that Urabrask doesn't have access to these kinds of cards. That being said, again, if they are in the same deck or in the same game, I mean, obviously, if you're playing an Urabrask deck against someone that might, you know, be playing a Curse deck, it can really pair well with that Curse of Exhaustion, and some deals I'm sure can be made to be incredibly brutal to one opponent. But outside of Urabrask being a commander, of course, it can be a fantastic card in the 99 of the deck, and the first commander that came to my mind was Prosper Tomebound. Prosper definitely might want this brand new Praetor. It has, whenever you play a card from exile, create a treasure token. So Prosper decks tend to be a lot about impulse draw and, you know, playing cards out of exile, which is exactly what you're going to be doing with Urabrask. Again, on your upkeep, you essentially get access to an additional card. So that when you cast that lovely card, you get a treasure to help you cast even more cards, probably from exile, to make even more treasure, and you see where this is going. Next up, another type of commander that actually really might want to utilize a card like Urabrask might be something like Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger, which can definitely be built in a discard style strategy. Kroxa has, whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, each opponent discards a card, then each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card this way loses 3 life. So Kroxa and a lot of the cards in that deck can really work well at tearing down your opponent's hands. And then, of course, if you've got Urabrask in play, well, now your opponent's draws, you know, just for their, you know, draw step draw, but still very impactful in that way, are going to be impulse draws, so they have to utilize that card right away or it is gone. So essentially, they're going to be playing without a hand for the vast majority of the game, and they can't even hold on to cards that they might want to be able to hold on to use for later. So obviously, in a similar way, a Crosis the Purger discard deck could work as well. Crosis has, when it deals combat damage to a player, you may pay 2 and a black. If you do choose a color, then that player reveals his or her hand, discards all the cards of that color. Crosis can wipe out hands left and right very quickly, and again, you know, once you get someone's hands wiped out, it's going to be very hard for them to start rebuilding with Urabrask in play. So yeah, I can definitely see it slotting into that deck as well. But as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to give you my final thoughts on Urabrask Heretic Praetor. Like other Praetors, like I've been saying, this is definitely that same kind of template. Hey, you get a benefit, your opponents get kind of the reverse of that benefit. So again, the advantage that this gives you is additional temporary card advantage, but still very impactful. And then also turning your opponent's actual, normal card advantage, I guess not really card advantage, but their, normal draw for the turn into temporary, which can be absolutely brutal in a lot of situations. And again, with the right build, again, most likely a group slug build, you can do some very brutal things to your opponents and make them have some very, 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 very tough decisions. Now, there are definitely players out there that very much do enjoy group slug style strategies. However, I'm not sure exactly how popular Urabrask is going to be. I mean, time will truly tell, but whether Urabrask is going to be more or less popular than the new Jin Gitaxias from the new Kamigawa, well, I'd have to probably lean and say that the new Jin Gitaxias is probably going to be more popular, but I could be wrong. That being said, there are still 2 more Praetors left. I believe, I'm not exactly following the Magic story all that closely, but we've got Shieldred, if Shieldred is still around. I think Shieldred's still around. I don't think the actual, demise of Shieldred was ever confirmed. I could be wrong. And of course, Elish Norn. So we shall see. Regardless, I don't think those are going to be spoilers from this set, but yeah, make sure you're staying tuned for more exciting spoilers from this set coming up. I've got more coffee to make, so here we go. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.